Israel's offensive against Hamas militants in southern Gaza intensifies as humanitarian conditions worsen. The UN has called for an immediate ceasefire. There are key differences between the EU and China that must be addressed. That's according to Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen as talks with China's president commence in Beijing. Israel's intensive air and ground offensive in southern Gaza continues. Its forces are said to be operating in the heart of the city of Khan Yunis. 25% of the city is under evacuation orders. Meanwhile, Hamas militants are reportedly relying on improvised bombs to inflict casualties and slow down the assault. The IDF and Hamas have released images of the fighting. The conflict has displaced thousands more Palestinians and worsened the territory's dire humanitarian conditions. The United Nations has called for an immediate ceasefire, a demand backed by Europe's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell. Hospitals continue to take in the wounded but are overwhelmed and can often only give the most basic treatment to dangerously injured individuals. Gaza's health ministry has said 1,207 Palestinians have been killed since the collapse of the temporary ceasefire at the beginning of the month. 70% of the dead are women and children. Israel's security cabinet has agreed to allow minimal amounts of fuel enter the Gaza Strip to, quote, prevent a humanitarian collapse and the outbreak of disease. It maintains Hamas brought war to Gaza after their cross-border attack on the 7th of October. The UN says some 1.87 million people, over 80% of the population of 2.3 million people, have already fled their homes. Many of them have been displaced several times. Medical experts are now concerned that epidemics could spread. China's President Xi Jinping shakes hands with European Council President Charles Michel and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Beijing. It's their first in-person meeting since 2019. The focus of the one-day EU-China summit is to exchange views on strategic and global economic issues. Topics are likely to include the capital's state subsidies for the electric vehicle industry. In her opening remarks to the press, von der Leyen said China is the EU's most important trading partner, but there are clear imbalances and differences that must be resolved. Ukraine's war effort has become embroiled in US political squabbles, with Republican senators blocking a White House request for €98 billion in emergency aid, primarily for Ukraine and Israel. The Republicans insisted that it be tied to sweeping US immigration and asylum reforms. They are angry at the lack of government action on an estimated 10,000 migrants crossing over from Mexico daily. Chuck Schumer, the Democrat Senate Majority Leader, spelled out the dangers of such action.
If Republicans in the Senate do not get serious very soon about a national security package, Vladimir Putin is going to walk right through Ukraine and right through Europe.
Hours before the vote, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had called on G7 leaders to remain effective against Russia. During the video link, he said Moscow is hoping next year the free world's consolidation efforts will collapse. The European Union and the US have committed most of the aid received by Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion began. In fact, Washington had just signed off on a €162 million weapons package, but it's feared US coffers could be running out.
Long-time skiers on the Serbia and Kopaonik mountains were pleased to see the early snow when they arrived this year, but their joy soon turned to disappointment when they discovered prices were much higher than ever before, outstripping even some of the most popular alpine resorts.
Nadamo se tim nekim dugoročnim prognozima da će ova zima malo biti hladnija, što je nama jako bitno da imamo uslove da pravimo veštački sneg, jer nam je centar 95% opremljen veštačkim snegom, tako da možemo da osnežimo 95% centra. I što nam je jako bitno da ako ta temperatura minusna bude, da osnežavamo veštački i da ne zavisimo od prirodnog snega.
Despite the prices, the Kapanoic resort was even busier than usual this weekend. But even for regulars, the price of snow this year is just too high.
Nažalost, zbog ovih cena ski pasa I celokupnog hotelskog smeštaja I vanpansionskog ovih cena, ove godine idemo u Francusku. Pošto imam još dva starija deteta koji skijaju, dobri su skijaši, ove godine idemo u Francusku gde me košta za nas troje €1.360 prevoz povratni autobusom, smeštaj i ski pas 6 dana u Lezoru za 1360 eura. A ovdje to ne mogu.
Kao što vidite iza mene, snega nema dovoljno, zato ga proizvode veštački, ali zato su cene ski pasa porasle za oko 25%.
Some are choosing to go to Slovenia this year, but many skiers have stuck with what they know and will keep coming to Serbia.
Sami smo se hranili, skupo je smeštaj, ski pas, skije, sve.
Smeta što se istopio malo, ali bit će u narednih dana, kaže da će opet da pada.
Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich's children have Lithuanian passports, say officials. The Interior Ministry have confirmed the findings of an investigative journalism centre which said at least 2 of his children have citizenship due to his grandparents. The Interior Ministry emphasised that Lithuanian passports must not be used as a cover to circumvent sanctions.
Ir kaip ir minėjau, esame inicijavę atitinkamas jau įstatymo pataisas, kad įvertinus saugumo situaciją, tokie asmenys tokios pilietybės mūsų šalies galėtų netekti.
Nes pilietis jisai turi daugybę teisių ir įvairiai gali, kaip sakant, kadangi mes turbūt pripažįstam, kad Rusija kelia grėsmę, o šitie žmonės yra susiję tiesiogiai su Putinu, čia jau net ne su dar kažkuo, tai ten apskritai su režimu, tiesiogiai su Putinu, tai iš tiesų tai yra labai rimta nacionalinio saugumo problema.
Earlier this year, an investigation found out that just before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, after which sanctions were imposed on Abramovich himself, the Russian oligarch transferred part of his assets to his children.
The US military has grounded an entire fleet of Osprey aircrafts following a deadly crash 1 week ago off the coast of Japan. 8 American service members lost their lives. Only 6 bodies have so far been recovered. Preliminary investigations indicated a material failure. The crash has raised questions about the safety of the Osprey aircrafts, which have been involved in multiple fatal accidents since becoming operational in 2007.
Russian investigators scoping a classroom at a school in Bryansk near the border with Ukraine after a 14-year-old girl shot dead one of her peers before committing suicide. The Commissioner for Children's Rights, Maria Lvova-Belova, says all necessary assistance to children and families will be provided. 5 others were injured in the shooting and are now in hospital. Russian state news reported one is in serious condition. Police say they are questioning the assailant's father to understand how the daughter acquired a gun. Fatal shootings in Russia have increased in recent years.
With its dazzling light installations, Lyon's Fête des Lumières is expected to attract some 2 million visitors and promises to offer something for everyone. Yet the festival is taking place just weeks after the counter-terror alert level in France was raised to its highest state.
C'est un événement qui se déroule dans un contexte de sécurité qui est un petit peu particulier, avec un haut niveau de menaces terroristes. Vous le savez, nous sommes en vigie pirate, urgence attentat. Et donc ça doit évidemment nous inciter à la plus grande vigilance possible.
The festival, which began in 1989, was cancelled in 2015 following the Paris terror attacks, and in 2020 due to the pandemic. This year, it is scheduled to go ahead as usual, with large parts of the city centre cordoned off. To secure the event, 500 national police officers and 220 local police have been recruited, plus 400 security personnel. Members of the military will also patrol the perimeters.
La Fête des Lumières, c'est le seul événement pour lequel systématiquement un plan hors sec est déclenché. Donc on est déjà sur un niveau de mobilisation maximal en fait, de toutes les forces de sécurité et de secours.
Local authorities have also banned a far-right group from infiltrating the annual procession during the festival, following recent violent acts from extremist groups.
S'il y avait des violences qui étaient commises ou tentées d'être commises aux abords de l'événement, en marge de l'événement par des groupuscules qui se voudraient violents. Nous interviendrons évidemment en fonction de la nature des actes qui seraient commis.
The security for the Fête des Lumières has already been at a high level since 2016, with the festival's artistic director telling Euronews that he expects the public to show up, with hotels and restaurants already reserved. And this year, extending beyond the city center, the city hopes that it will touch a larger population. This is Lauren Chadwick reporting for Euronews.
Fishermen in the Gulf of Naples preparing to go out for the daily catch. These white polystyrene boxes on board will soon be a thing of the past. 2 municipalities in the area have joined forces in the fight against plastic pollution. Thanks to European funds, thousands of reusable plastic fishing crates are being purchased to replace their polystyrene counterparts. The multi-purpose brittle material is one of the main causes of microplastic pollution in the Mediterranean Sea.
Penso che sarà il futuro questa cassetta, vedo una cosa positiva. Sia per l'igiene dell'ambiente che per la società di chi fa questo mestiere.
Unlike the old polystyrene crates, the new carriers can be washed and disinfected. These fishermen from the village of Pozzuoli are ready for the change.
Le nuove cassette di plastica verranno lavate col microchip, ci saranno sempre non verranno più buttate nell'ambiente. C'è un po' di lavoro in più, però penso che sia meglio, perché il futuro secondo me è meglio questa qua e magari proteggiamo l'ambiente.
I pescatori di Pozzuoli dimostrano che è possibile coniugare l'attenzione al lavoro con il rispetto dell'ambiente. Un piccolo cambiamento può significare molto per la salute del mare in cui lavorano.
Tutte le azioni che potranno essere in campo dal punto di vista ambientale, miglioramento ambientale, loro sono a fianco